Thank you for listening to the Biblical Editorial Review, which airs Thursdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central and 7 p.m. Pacific. Listen to the show only on the Resilient Christian Radio.
Find out what we need to do about this. Confronting the Postmodern Lie. Now, there is an insidious weed slowly and deceptively poisoning the worldview of the present-day Christian and weaken the foundation of many. It's a lie that, according to culture, is presented as truth. Is a motto preached for almost every social media outlet, car radio, television screen, school, both secular and remorsefully some claim to be name of Christ. It is a weed so intertwined with our thinking that at times we cannot differentiate the plant from the intruder. This is postmodernism. It has been and will continue to strangle and suffocate the impact of a clear, distinctive Christian testimony unless someone or something is done to eradicate it. To do so, we must understand the very roots as we pull it out. Now, before we go any further here, I need to give you some groundwork here about the postmodernism. Because sometimes people think, what is that? What is postmodernism? And a lot of times we could go into this and just literally don't understand what that is. But let's go ahead and find out what this postmodernism really is. Now, a lot of the left-wing people from the left literally believe and they stand firmly of this postmodernism. Now, let's read what it is. It's described as a broad movement that develops in the mid-late 20th century according to philosophy, the arts, architecture, and criticism, which marks the departure from modernism, which encompasses a broader range of ideals. Postmodernism is typically defined by an attitude of skepticism, irony, or distrust toward grand narratives, ideologies, and various tenets of the Enlightenment rationality, including notions of human nature, social progress, objective reality, and mortality, absolute truth, and reasoning. Instead, it claims to knowledge and truth are products of unique social, historical, or political discourse or interpretations, and are therefore contextual and constructive to various degrees. Accordingly, postmodern thought is broadly characterized by tendencies of individualism and moral relativism, pluralism, and innovations of self-reliance. The term postmodernism has been applied both in the eras of following of modernity and in host of the movement within its era, mainly in arts, music, and literature. Its reaction according or against tendencies of modernism. Postmodernism includes skepticism, criticizing interpretations of culture, literature, art, philosophy, history, linguistics, economy or economics, architecture, fiction, feminist theory, and literal criticism. Now, postmodernism is often associated with schools of thought such as deconstruction and post-structuralism, as well as philosophers such as John from Leopold and Franco Derinsky. All these here shows hypocrisy to a lot of ways, causing people to think in the far left way. It is all started years ago, and especially in the 20th century, which that's in like the 1900s. All this here has its own figural place, which it caused a lot of problems within our society, but especially in the church. Especially in the church. Now, let's go into this a little bit broader here. The development of postmodernism in the Western world can be divided into three broad spectrums. The pre-modern era, where there was no option but to believe in God. The modern era, which was possible to believe in God. And the postmodern era, which is impossible to believe in God. Let's repeat this one more time here. The development of postmodernism in the Western world can be divided into three broad spectrums. The pre-modern era, which was no option but to believe in God. Okay? No option but to believe in God. The modern era, which was possible to believe in God. So it's almost like a gray area. And the post era, in which it is impossible to believe in God, when it means that it's no such thing as God. It means I could be my own God. That's pretty much what it all says. Because you get to read between the lies. And that is our series, this part here that we are constructed for, a two-part series called The Read Between the Lies of This Modern Day Age, because it is a phantom of lies that just striking at every core of what God has for us. And this is going on, and this is the telltale signs that God is coming back. I mean, this is the best way to explain that God is coming back. Let's go a little bit further here. Okay? The pre-modern era was characterized by the influence of the Roman Catholic Church and narrated by the the Protestant Reformation to be the principle of sola scriptura. In both cases, God was indivisible for daily life. That is until the 1700s, when Rene Diocletian published Discourse of the Method, which he gave us the famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am," essentially saying that existence is authenticated by personal reason. And Francis Bacon created the scientific method, and John Locke proposed empiricism, the theory that knowledge is birthed from sensory experience, affirming Diocletian's phrase. Now, at this same time in America, the Founding Fathers penned the Declaration of Independence, stating that the chief end of man was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, deity thrived where God was seen as the watchmaker and the world as the watch. Now, let me put this in emphasis on here so you could get a broad spectrum of what's going on here. The way that we have in this culture is that people nowadays don't want to believe in God. So what they do, they use cliches now to try to spectralize God to be something that is not. Like, if we have a storm and it killed many people, they blame God for the people getting died instead of looking at the violence of the storm itself, which usually comes from the devil, because remember, God doesn't destroy anything. The devil does. God creates. Why would a creator destroy unless he had to allow it to destroy for the reason of his glory, not to destroy it because he wanted to. Because think about it, if you're doing it for his glory, it's because he is a holy God. And a holy God does not be around things like sin. So sin is the culprit. And that's why he rather eradicates sin. And that's why Jesus came in and did that for us. So for us to not to make it impossible to believe God, it just takes away who God really is. And that right there turns into making God more as a sinner, passive piece that he doesn't need to be. He is absolute, period. So that's why we need to come to grips and realize that God is who he is. And that's why we need to read why God he is. Like, for instance, the watchman or the watchmaker made the watch and removed himself, let it run on its own accord. Now, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, the latter, who literally cut out the miracles in his personal Bible, removed them because they were irrational, held disbelief. To modernists, the Bible became an ordinary book filled with errors that were scientifically unverifiable. Now, life was explained by science and reason, and man began to assert his own authority over life rather than God's. Thus, the modern era of theological liberalism was born. Now, this is where the church got caught up with the liberalism. The church got caught up with all this liberalism because they said, wait a minute, we can't prove these things. And why not? If you know that word God is absolute, why do you need to prove anything about it? But in our minds and how sin works and how sin operates, they challenge God. And that's where we live in this day, recklessly challenging him, trying to get God to be something that he's not, trying to get God to think in the ways that we want him to think, but never really take the time to acknowledge the Father for who he is. This here is telltale sign how we become our own gods. And this right here, God said, if you make anything above him, you idolize that thing, it's evil in his eyes. And this is why everything in our life comes to that play of how we think. So this is where modernism was characterized by the hollow optimism helped along with the Industrial Revolution, which promised that science and reason could solve all humanity's problems and figure out every mystery in the universe. Now, optimism was disparaged under the horrors of World War I and World War II, where the technological advances they made to alleviate pain were used to cause it. Now, foundations of absolute truth in the modern era has been taken away from the Bible and placed under science and reason, which turned out to be just as empty as Solomon lampened it will be in Ecclesiastes. Now, think about it. Solomon is what God gave Solomon wisdom because he asked for it. So God did not take it away from him, but he did error. Solomon error by getting in the
Check us out at Facebook at RCR Network. And also on Twitter at RCR_network. And our website at rcrnetwork.com.